Oh, scrubbing bubbles.
Over the years, I've shared several gardening tips integrated into my videos, but I've never put them all in one place. Well, in today's video, I'm going to share with you my most popular garden hacks. Hi, it's Steph. Welcome back. Today I'm going to share with you my favorite garden tricks and tips, also known as hacks. And I'm going to start with one of my favorites, a mailbox in the garden. Now you might be thinking, a mailbox in the garden? Yes, because they are weatherproof and you can keep them outside in a location where you do most of your gardening to keep extra tools and anything that you might need while doing your work. Now, years ago, I installed a mailbox in my raised bed garden and I have found it to be so useful to keep extra tools or anything that I'm needing to use at that moment without having to run back to my shed or my basement to grab things. You can put a mailbox on a tree, you can put a mailbox on a post like you would a birdhouse in the middle of a large flower border or flower bed. That way, if you're doing work in that garden bed, like maybe deadheading or cutting some flowers to bring inside, you would have some snips or pruners available close by. So if you don't have a mailbox in your garden, I highly suggest putting one there for storage to keep extra things on hand. And a money-saving tip using all of those plastic nursery pots that we as gardeners have stacks of everywhere is to use them to take up volume in large planters so that we can save on potting soil. I have done this for years and it works really well, especially with annuals, because annuals like petunias or mandevilla are only going to be in that container for a short period of time. They don't need a ton of soil in order to have proper root development. So what you can do is go through your stack of pots and find one that fits nicely at the bottom of that large planter, and you will flip it upside down and then you will pour your potting soil over that and fill in your pot. And what that does also is not only does it take up volume, but it also prevents your drainage holes from getting clogged. And an added benefit is that larger planters will be lighter because they won't be filled all the way through with soil, making them easier to move. Now, if you are going to plant something like a perennial in that container that will come back year after year, or even an evergreen shrub, you want to make sure that you do fill up the planter with all soil, because you do need that soil to give that plant proper root development and to hold adequate moisture. But those nursery pots are a great filler so that you can save on potting soil. And another money-saving tip when it comes to soil is to reuse your potting soil. You do not have to dump out and start over anytime that you plant a planter. You can keep that soil in there and just refresh it. What I do is I take out any plants that I have in the container and the top third of soil and clean out any roots or anything that I can find in there and leave it nice and loose and fluffy. And then I just refill the top third with some fresh potting soil, and I will sprinkle in something like an Osmocote or slow release fertilizer that will continue to break down as you water that container and feed your plants. It is a myth that you have to change out your soil every time that you plant into it, because most people will redo their containers a couple of times a year, and if you were to dump out all of that soil and refill it each time, it can get quite expensive. So don't do that. There is one occasion in which you would have to dump out your soil and start over. That is if you're growing something in that container that gets really a lot of growth in that growing period of time, something like an ornamental grass. By the end of the season, it will completely fill the pot with roots, and at that point, it is time to start over. So any annuals or plants that you have growing in a container that grow vigorously, that put out a lot of roots, will end up eating up all of that soil. And when you try to water that container, the soil becomes hydrophobic, which means it will no longer absorb moisture. So at that point, you know that your plant does not have any more soil to feed off of and no more room for water to absorb. It is time to start over. So when it comes to potting soil, you don't always have to replace, you can sometimes just refresh. And one of my favorite nursery shopping tips, buy one, get one perennials. And I'm not talking about a sale. I'm talking about buying a perennial that is large enough for you to divide into two right off the bat. And I do this over and over again in my garden. If there is a plant that I see at the nursery, a perennial that I'm interested in buying, or something I've had on my wish list for a while, and I finally find it, I try to find the largest one I can get at the nursery. Anything that has a very clear division point is even more helpful. And once I get home, I will split that plant into two. When you purchase plants at the nursery or garden center, most times those plants have been growing in those nursery containers for a couple of seasons to get up to the size that they are for you to purchase them. And for that reason, a lot of them can get pretty root bound and are screaming to get out of that container and divided and planted out into the garden. So why not use that as an opportunity to divide it right off the bat? And I do this constantly. It's a great way to stretch your gardening budget and to get more plants for the same amount of money. Coffee filters. I love these to line the bottom of my planters in pots. So anytime that I am going to plant up a pot, I will take a stack of about 3 coffee filters and put them right over the drain hole. And what this does is it prevents the drainage hole from getting clogged up with soil, and it also prevents dirtying the surfaces from soil runoff. So if you have it on a porch or somewhere where you don't want all that soil coming out of your planter, by putting coffee filters at the bottom, it will prevent that. And the coffee filters do break down over time, but I usually find that when it's time to switch out the soil in that planter, at that point, I will go ahead and replace my coffee filters. Making DIY plant feet. Now, DIY plant feet are super easy by using something like a scrap wood or paint stirrers. And these are a lot of things that people sometimes just have hanging around the house. In fact, we did this last year by using a piece of long Trex decking that we had left over from our home's construction. For over 10 years, this was sitting in the basement, but we were able to utilize it by cutting lengths to place underneath our corten steel planters to elevate that planter off of the ground. By creating a little bit of a gap between the bottom of the planter and the ground, it allows your drain hole to drain freely, and by not sitting directly on the ground, you also prevent a family of pill bugs from forming underneath and climbing up into your soil. So look around for some pieces of scrap wood that you might have left over from a project, or even some old pallets that you can utilize to make some free plant feet. And the next segment isn't exactly gardening related, but it does have to do with the home. So home and garden. It is how you can use a few household cleaners to tackle a couple of really common issues on the exterior of the home. Over to you, George.
Thanks, Steph. Dawn dish soap. I use this for a lot of my exterior cleaning projects, especially the siding. Sometimes here on the shady part of the house, we get a little bit of algae buildup, and I use a soft brush with an extendable pole, and I clean it up just with this soap. I also use Simple Green. We use this on the windowsills and on our door frames, and it works really good. But there was one area of the home where I couldn't get cleaned with Dawn or Simple Green. Our garage doors. There's a weather stripping that goes around the garage door. It's white, it's right here in the corner. It's about 14 years old, and it had almost like a mildew appearance to it. So I tried those other products, it didn't work. I also tried a magic eraser. That wasn't working. So then I went to the internet and I searched around, and I found that oh, shit. Scrubbing bubbles. Foaming bleach. So you got to be really careful with this stuff. It worked really well though. I am going to insert a clip of when I actually used it. I was so surprised at how well this worked. So I'm about to start on the garage skins project, but first I wanted to clean up this weather stripping that I have here around the garage door. So I started to spray right in that area, and you can see the top of the trim is dirty, but at the bottom it's clean. And all I did was I just sprayed this on, and then I went to go get a hose real quick, and by the time I came back, it looked like that. Like the bottom was completely clean. And even over here on this side area, it's perfectly clean. I didn't scrub it or do anything. I had a brush, but I didn't use it. So this stuff works really good. And because this product does contain bleach, you should probably open up your garage door before you get started, just in case it's a garage skin or it's a painted surface, and go right behind your molding and just spray it like this. As you can see from that clip, no scrubbing, and it just worked. So let me show you one other area that I used that product on, and it worked great. In this mailbox post, it's made out of a plastic PVC material, and it had a bunch of mildew here on the right side, and nothing I used would get rid of that except for this product. The only thing I would say is, because this does contain bleach, just be careful. When I used it on here, below me, there's a bunch of grass here. I just got a bucket of water and I really soaked that grass. So any residual of this was diluted, and it didn't harm the grass. It was fine. So just be careful when using it, but it does work. And lastly, I found the tip to use the scrubbing bubbles on a site called Sawdust Girl online. So we'll link the post to that down below. And we are not sponsored by any of these products. We're just giving you our experience with them.
And a great way to keep your garden weed-free without the use of chemicals is using newspaper or cardboard. Now, I specifically like newspaper for use in my planting beds or flower beds because at this point my beds are pretty tightly packed with flowers and there's not a lot of space. So newspaper, being very pliable, allows me to tear it into pieces or fold it how I need it to fit between plants before I apply my mulch. And I find that if I stack the newspaper about 5 or 6 sheets and put it down, it usually takes about a year or 2 before I start seeing that newspaper break down and weeds poking through. So newspaper works really well in planting beds. And for areas where I might have more space between plants, or if I want to start a new planting area, I love cardboard, and specifically the pallet cardboard. And you heard it here first, friends. I had never seen anyone do this, and one day I was at the store and I found this perfect piece of 4x4 clean cardboard, and I asked the employee if I could take it home, and they allowed me to, and I have been hooked ever since. I have found so many uses for this pallet cardboard in my garden. It is perfect because there are no cuts, no tears, no glue, tape, or staples, and no ink. So it is the perfect square to begin a new planting project by using them to do the sheet mulching process. Now, sheet mulching is laying down the cardboard with some compost and some mulch over it to break down your grass without having the back-breaking labor of having to lift that sod manually. Underneath the cardboard, you have earthworms that are working hard to break down that grass and that cardboard, which will then feed and enhance your soil. So the next time that you're looking to start a new planting bed or to put some weed control underneath your mulch, think of some newspaper, some paper grocery bags, and some cardboard, specifically pallet cardboard. Using recycled plastic bottles as mini greenhouses. This is a process called winter sowing, and it works beautifully. I have done this for several years and have several videos on my channel regarding the winter sowing process. It is the method of growing seeds without the need to take up any indoor space, the use of grow lights or heating mats, and it makes for a more resilient and strong seedling because it's been growing outside in the elements. The seed will typically germinate when Mother Nature signals it that it is time to do so, and it is really a great process. So the next time that you have a plastic bottle that you're thinking about throwing in the recycle bin, think if you have any seeds that you can try throwing in that container and making a mini greenhouse to try out the winter sowing method. And another use for recycled plastic bottles and for that stack of nursery pots that we all have hanging around is to provide cold protection to your seedlings in case of a late season frost, essentially making a cloche. Now, a lot of us start seeds and we'll plant them out in the spring when we think that the last chance of frost has passed, but inevitably a cold front will come through and we'll get an unexpected frost, and we scramble to try to protect our seedlings. And you can use things like frost cover, but if you don't have them handy and you have a plastic bottle, you can just cut the bottom off of that bottle, shove it into the soil to keep it steady and in place, and that will offer just enough cold protection to protect your seedling during that cold spell. You can also use a flipped over nursery pot right over that seedling and place a rock on top of it to weight it down. Just remember that once that cold front passes and it starts to warm up again, you want to immediately uncover that seedling so that it doesn't roast from the sun in that hot plastic. DIY plant markers from recycled materials. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm always needing more plant markers. I have bought some in the past, but I've also found some great ways to make some that you can use around the garden. One of them is through using plastic knives. Now, have you ever noticed when you buy a set of cutlery for a party or barbecue, inevitably all of the spoons and all of the forks will be gone, but you will be left with a stack of knives that no one uses? Well, this happens to be a very common issue, and I know this because recently I had my cutlery tray with only knives left, and when I went to the store to replace the forks and the spoons, they specifically sold boxes of just forks and spoons. So what do you do with all of those knives? Well, if they are white and have a solid color, you are very easily able to write a plant name on them and shove them in the soil. So the next time that you get takeout and you have a package of cutlery that you don't use the knife from, or you have leftover cutlery from a party that includes just knives, put those to use by making plant markers for the garden. Some other items that can be used to make plant markers are old mini blinds. You can cut up those blades and you can get hundreds of plant markers. And you can even cut up containers of things like cottage cheese, sour cream, or yogurt in strips to use as garden markers. And something important to remember is when you actually write onto your plant tags, you want to use a marker that's going to be UV and weather resistant, because the last thing you want to do is label your plant and have the ink washing off from the rain or fading from the sun. And I have used Sharpies in the past, but I have found that garden markers actually work a lot better, and I can link my favorite below. Dollar Tree mesh waste baskets as plant cloches. I have used these in my garden for several years and have shared it in multiple videos. In fact, just this summer when I was working out in my Japanese maple garden digging up some hostas, I had shared with you that I had all of my ferns protected by these wire waste baskets as cloches because something was eating them. Now they sell them in two sizes. They have a shorter one and a taller one. The shorter one is okay for newer seedlings, but my preference is the taller one that may be around 12 inches or so. And they come in black and in white. And I tend to prefer the black ones because I feel like they fade into the background a bit more and are less noticeable in my flower beds. But if you're looking for some really affordable plant cloches, check out the Dollar Tree. They usually have them available in store, but they do sell pretty quickly because I think they've become a pretty popular item. Using a garden hose to create a new planting bed shape or to enhance an existing shape of a bed. Now, most people will automatically think that you need marking spray or even some clothesline in order to outline the edge of a planting bed, but you might not necessarily have those items readily available, where most homeowners and gardeners already own a garden hose, so it makes them a great option. There's also a lot of length on a garden hose, and it's very flexible, which gives you the ability to play with different shapes and sizes. So the next time that you're thinking of either enhancing or fixing the edge on a flower bed or creating a new one, use a garden hose to play with some shapes. Have you ever wanted to move a heavy rock in your landscape and not sure how to do it? Well, we had the same issue this past summer when George had found a really pretty rock in the yard that he wanted to use in our landscape. And so he was determined to get that rock moved. And at the time, we didn't have a hand cart, which is something that you can use to help move a rock or even heavy planters filled with soil. So we had to think outside the box. And what he came up with was rolling it on some pieces of pipe. We actually happened to have some spare pieces of PVC piping in our basement, and he put 3 of them together, and he was able to slowly move that rock from one place of the yard to the area in the garden where he wanted to use it as garden art. I hope that this list of garden tips, tricks, and hacks was helpful to you. If you enjoyed this video, I would love it if you could hit the thumbs up. It really helps my channel grow. And if you haven't yet subscribed, it's free to do so, and it just allows YouTube to let you know the next time I post a video. So thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I will catch you in the next one.